Okay, team, welcome along. It is Friday. I know we're all losing track of days and months and everything at the moment, aren't we? But it is Friday, so welcome along. Today we are talking about, let's just make sure my PowerPoint is going to be behaving. There we go. Your PTS course was cancelled. So now what? What are we going to do to help you? Well, as of course we have done all week, we've got amazing tips and tricks for you. And I've got my partner in crime down there. That's Stefan. He's going to be joining me. So just a little bit about my background for anybody that doesn't know me. My name's Nikki Coyne. I've got a background in healthcare, in nursing. About 28 years ago, I made the switch from healthcare into disease prevention. So here I am in the fitness industry for the last 28 years. And yes, when I started, Jane Fonda was wearing a thong and leg warmers, and so was I. So that's how long ago it was. Now things have moved on, obviously. We're here today to help you with getting ready for your practical exam. So what I would like to do is offer advice based on 11 years of being a pro trainer and working with the PTS certification. So lots of advice that we're going to be able to give you. And I'm going to hand over to Steph because he's going to tell you a little bit about his background, and then we can get on with talking about your practical exam. Over to you, Stefan.
All right, so my name is Stefan Gusses. I've been a personal trainer for 12 years now. Went to university for kinesiology, specializing in athletic therapy. So kind of that's where my specialties are, biomechanics, movement therapy. I do a lot with injured athletes, injured individuals in general, and kind of working with them through all their fitness and health goals. The last couple of years, I focused a lot on powerlifting and Olympic lifting. So I became a powerlifting coach, an Olympic lifting coach as well, and kind of molded the two worlds together from a therapeutic perspective and from, high-level performance lifting, perspective. So yeah, today I'm just going to kind of help you guys the best I can, kind of working in the trenches all the time as a PT and just kind of helping you guys with your practical exam.
Yes, that's exactly what we're going to do. So here's a little bit of housekeeping that we're going to talk about. So as of now, all exams and courses have been cancelled up until April the 13th. You will get lots of information from canfitpro as this begins to change. So please keep checking your emails. There's nothing that you need to do right now. We will contact you when it's safe, and there'll be no charges for rescheduling and timings and all those sort of things. So don't worry about that. And your pro trainer will be in contact with you to let you know of dates and things that they have available. So when it gets down to you actually booking a date, then you can work with canfitpro, your pro trainer, and yourself to get a date that works for you. That's the most important thing. So canfitpro is doing all we can to support everybody through this tricky time. And there's lots of information, all the frequently asked questions you can find at canfitpro.com. So today is going to run about an hour, we'll see. You can ask questions in the chat box. So Beth is there, she'll be mediating that. So if it's something that she can answer, she will answer you back in the chat. If it's something that needs to come to us, then we'll have a look at what's there at the end and address anything that we need to. Okay, yes. All right, so let's talk about what the practical exam is, because a practical exam is the party at the end of your certification, because you've done the course, you've done the tricky theory exam, and we helped you with that on Wednesday, and now this is the party. So this is the bit where you get to show us all those amazing personal skills that you've got. So in your package for your practical exam, you will get candidate instructions, which do exactly what they say on the label there. It's instructions on how we want you to run your practical exam. Excuse me. So you can read through that. It will then highlight the fact that you need to bring somebody with you. And if you will have been sent a case study by your, you'll be sent a case study by your pro trainer beforehand that comes out with the candidate instructions and all this paperwork. So when you receive your case study and you have, for example, a 25-year-old female teacher, when we say bring somebody to your practical exam, it doesn't have to be a 25-year-old female teacher. It can be your dad pretending to be a 25-year-old female. We're not looking at the client. We're looking at how you build rapport, your language, all of that sort of thing, your coaching. So it doesn't matter who you bring, okay? And it doesn't have to relate to your case study. So candidate instructions. Then we've got the evaluation form. Evaluation form. I'm not sure what that's referring to. I'll come back to that. Then you've got your case study, you've got your program card, and you've got your periodization program. It's you receive a copy of the practical exam. Yeah. So that's what they put, candidate evaluation form. So that's a copy of the practical exam. So you can see exactly how we are going to mark you. So we are going to be looking for you talking about certain things at a certain point. So that gives you a really good idea. So when you start scripting about, well, when I do my setup for my passive assessment, what things do I need to cover? Yeah, so it gives you a really good outline of what we'll be expecting to hear. Having said that, we're not just going to stand there with a clipboard in our hand and not say anything. So we appreciate it's a very unnatural situation that we're putting you in, because you're almost acting out. So if you're nervous and you forget to say something, your pro trainer will say, okay, what other things might you want to address in this particular portion? Yeah. So we'll give you some coaching, or, which muscle groups are you going to be focused on when you do that? So we're testing your knowledge. We're not testing your memory. That's a really good point. We're trying to set you up for success. So you receive all of that in a package via email from your pro trainer when you're talking about setting up your dates. And that's ahead of time. Understand the expectations, yeah, because you've got a copy of the exam, so you see exactly what it is that we want you to be able to convey to us, so that we can see you're communicating safely with your client. Successful completion is 80% or higher. You will know your results on the day. We will go away, we'll mark the exam, we'll go into an office, we'll do everything that we need to do, we'll write out a plan of action, we'll write out feedback. We come back and we sit down and we have a debrief with you. So you will know on the day if you've passed. It's always recommended that between doing your theory exam and your practical exam, that you find time to do your CPR in that chunk. Because for us as pro trainers, there's a box that we need to fill out that says, yes, we've seen your CPR and we've written the issue date on there. If we don't see your CPR, if you haven't done it and you're saying, oh yeah, I'm going to do it later, then we send in your paperwork. You then have to send in your CPR, and we hope that the two match up in the database. So if you want to dot all the I's and cross all the T's, it's highly recommended that you do your CPR before you arrive at your practical exam. Okay, so the periodization program is probably the thing that people find the most challenging, because as we talked about on Wednesday's webinar, when we talked about the theory exam, writing out the periodization program, as Stefan talked about, is like writing the book for your client. You need a beginning, a middle, and an end. So you're going to look at the case study that you're sent, and you are going to be asked to design a periodization program. So Steph, this is your specialty. So I am going to hand this slide over to you.
Okay. Yeah, so when we're talking about giving yourself time to complete it, definitely give yourself time to complete it. If you're not used to writing programs, then it takes a lot longer than you think. So that's one of the biggest reasons why you get these those 2 weeks in between your email to your exam date, is so that you do have time to really write this out. First thing that I'm going to say, or I recommend, even for the programs that I write for everybody, write out your mesocycles first. So basically, that's basically labeling all of your chapters, or labeling kind of your big chunks in the program, right? So your macro cycle is essentially the whole thing. In this case, you're looking at, a 52-week period. So the mesocycle would be those small training blocks in between. You want to make sure you label those first, because that's the hardest thing to do. So example could be, you spend your first 6-7 weeks in a foundation or a circuit training phase. And then your next 7-8 weeks would be in muscular hypertrophy. Your next 6-7 weeks would be in strength. So you want to make sure that you break those down first, because again, that's the hardest thing to do. And that really sets the tone for kind of framing out what you're going to be doing month by month, 2 months by 2 months. And then after that, you're simply just filling everything else in after that, right? But what I find trainers have the hardest time doing is really kind of figuring out what to do first, second, third, and fourth. They just kind of jumble everything up, and then it doesn't really have any flow or any real purpose. So that's the first thing that I would do, is get the mesocycles down first. And then from there, you just simply apply your FIT principle. This is probably the second mistake a lot of trainers make when they're making their program designs is, example, you're saying, okay, I'm going to be doing an 8-week strength training phase. And then when they're applying their FIT principle, what do? They say, oh, I'm going to do 8-12 reps with a 1-minute rest. That doesn't make any sense, right? Because if we're applying the FIT principle for strength training, we know that it has to be 1 to 8 reps. You're looking at, 1 to 5, 6 sets, and you're over a 2-minute break. So really, really make sure that whatever phase you're in, your FIT principle has to coincide with those specific guidelines. Otherwise, you're not really in a strength training phase, and then we have to question whether or not you know what a strength phase is, right? So really make sure that whatever phase you're picking, your guidelines have to coincide with that. They can't come outside of that. Otherwise, it is incorrect at that point. But for the most part, you can write a program thousands of ways, right? There's no one way to make a program. So don't get hung up on, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on, or I don't know if this makes sense. The biggest thing that makes sense to us is that if you have written something down, you should be able to explain why as it pertains to your client. That's the most important thing. It's not about, oh, are you 1 week off here? Are you 1 week off there? It's why do you have it to begin with? And you need to be able to explain it and rationalize it so that to make your client successful. That's the most important thing, right? That's the big takeaway. That's kind of the big picture.
Yeah, I think so. And like you say, we every time we do one of these practical exams, everybody designs a program differently. So as long as, and your pro trainer will sit down probably before you do your exam with all of the information, and we will spend time looking at the program, and then we'll spend time looking at the periodization program, and then we will ask you some questions. And we ask it as a discovery, not as a, is it right or is it wrong? It's more being inquisitive about, oh, that's really interesting. I would never have thought about that. But as long as, as Stefan said, as long as you can explain it and it's within the guidelines, then it'll be fine. So within your manual, you do actually have a copy of a periodization program. It's not written out in the same style as the periodization sheet that's sent to you, but it's written out in your manual. So you do have, and I think that is a muscle build program that's in the manual. Oh, internet connection is unstable. Yeah,
so just really make sure that whatever you write out, expect to have a question on it. That's kind of if don't write something out if you have no idea what it is. Okay, please don't do that, or don't fill it out because you feel like you have to fill space. Okay? For me, it's more important that everything on the paper makes sense, as opposed to all these words and we don't know what half of it is. Okay? Yeah, and absolutely. Yeah, and the biggest thing is that you have to make sure that, again, like your client's going to have goals. Please make sure that those goals are in your program where you are going to achieve them. Because if the program isn't related to goals, then for lack of a better word, the program is terrible. Because it's at the end of the day, it's all about your client, right? So you have to make sure that you label in your program, okay, these are the goals. This is where I'm going to hit this goal. This is where I'm going to hit this goal. Like, you have to show that, because that's what your client is essentially paying you for.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about demonstrating coaching. So what happens is that we will spend time sitting down with you at the beginning. We're looking at that periodization program. We're looking at the 2-week segment that you've pulled out of that, which is on your program card. So we look at that. So we've got a 2-week example of something that's going to happen in your periodization program. And then that's broken down into the exercises. We're looking at sets, reps, we're looking at tempo, looking at rest times, all of that. So then we mark that one. Then we'll let you know, or your pro trainer should let you know exactly what's going to happen on your exam. So, you know, usually what's going to happen is we're going to start with the passive and dynamic assessments. From there, we will then take you over to see a little piece of equipment. Maybe it's bike, treadmill, or elliptical. And then we'll go on and we'll ask you to demonstrate some of the resistance exercises using various types of equipment. It depends where your pro trainer is doing your exam, and it depends on what equipment is available. But you should, at the end of your exam, be able to safely coach clients using a variety of equipment that is covered in the manual. So that's a point that I would put out, which is we don't use kettlebells, we don't use TRX, we don't use Olympic, well, I'm not going to say Olympic lifts, but that's a whole other thing. So what I want you to concentrate on is what you are covered to use, having completed the canfitpro personal training specialist course, which is dumbbells and barbells. If you want to use kettlebells, you're going to go and get an additional qualification for that. So that would always be my advice on your exam, is use what you've been taught on the course. So you're going to demonstrate and coach. First of all, it will be your passive assessment. So again, yes, you can bring the sheet that you would have been given on your exam, in your course, which is the sheet that we use that shows you all the different coaching points for that passive assessment. So you can have that with you. You can be marking that off. Some of the things I see a lot is lack of building rapport. And that's a huge part. Remember, we've already marked your knowledge. We know you've got the knowledge. What your practical exam needs to show us is that you have a personality, that you're able to build rapport with your clients, and that you can act as a motivator to them. So you're also going to be giving them amazing information, but you need to be able to motivate them and coach them and all those sort of things. So the first thing you're looking for when you're setting somebody up for these assessments is, are you making your client feel at ease? Do they feel comfortable, and do they feel safe knowing exactly what it is that you're asking them to do? So in that passive assessment, you're asking your client to stand still. So, okay, jump up and down a little bit and hold it there. I don't want you to move. I'm just going to walk around and take a look at how you're standing, because I'm going to assess your posture in this really natural state. So that would be a really good setup to this passive assessment. You can then walk around with your sheet, marking, saying to your client, oh, that's really interesting. What do you do as a job? You sit at a desk. Are you right-handed or are you left-handed? Okay, I'm going to talk to you about what's going on with your shoulders in a minute. So you're educating them while you're walking around and looking at them. What is not a good idea is not to tell them anything and just like creepily walk around and like stare at them, and they're like, I have no clue what this person is doing. So it's all about making your client feel at ease and feel comfortable as we set them up for that passive assessment. Stefan, would you like to talk a little bit about the dynamic assessment?
Yeah, so with the dynamic assessment, again, you have your 3 tests. You have your rotation, straight leg raise, and your overhead squats. I find that the most difficult aspect of this is actually the introduction to the test and then the conclusion of the test, not the actual performance of the test. When you are assessing anybody, and Nikki touched on this, it's a very vulnerable time. People don't like being assessed because people don't like being judged, and the gym stereotypically has that. People feel judged in the gym. So again, your number one responsibility as a coach, as a trainer, or as an influencer is to make someone feel comfortable. So when you're introducing the test, explain why you're doing it. That's number one. You have to explain why you're doing it, make sure that they're comfortable doing it. And then in the conclusion, you have to actually tell them, you can't just say, oh, that was good, or oh, that was terrible. You have to relay it to their goals, right? Because everything at the end of the day is about someone's goals. And especially during a practical exam, it's very easy to forget that because you're trying to remember so many other things. So when you're doing your dynamic assessments, always think about the client's goals and again, building that trust. So if they do have a great overhead squat, it's not good enough for me, as your assessor to be like, okay, so that was great. Yeah, that was great. That doesn't really help the client. You want to say things like, okay, so, we have an amazing overhead squat. So we know that we want to lose 20 pounds to fit into that wedding dress. We're starting at such a good point right now because you have such an amazing squat that we're going to be able to add more advanced exercises earlier for you so that we can get you to drop weight a lot faster, or we can get you to drop inches faster to fit into that wedding dress. So this is actually like super exciting for us because now we can get you to that goal so much faster. So that kind of information excites someone. It gets them to trust you and they want to continue to work with you. Vice versa, if their overhead squat isn't good, you still want to say things in a positive way. So if someone's overhead squat isn't great, you want to say things like, all right, so, we have some limitations in our overhead squat. So the first thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to correct these movement patterns. So our first couple of weeks of training is going to be a lot of us correcting these movement patterns, getting you to squat as well as I do, because if you can squat as well as me, imagine how fast you can get to these goals, right? You want to start to say things to keep your client excited, keep them engaged, and again, kind of related to the goal. So that would be my advice and I guess for the actual assessment itself, please practice it over and over and over again. Don't just read it. And for the individual that you bring, please, if you can, perform the tests on them a couple of times prior. If it's the very, very first time you're doing it during the exam, honestly, it's very apparent and it comes off really, really choppy, and then you get flustered and then everything kind of falls apart. So I recommend that whoever you're bringing to your dynamic assessment, please practice with them prior so that they have a little bit of understanding. You also have a little bit of an understanding. And then, that segment of the exam comes off much smoother.
Yeah, and you're right, because if somebody gets flustered in that, literally, this is in the first 15, 20 minutes.
Oh yeah, it's
the
over.
rest of the exam is like, oh no.
It's literally over at that point.
It is. So there's some really good points. One that Stefan brought up that, and he and I use the language a couple of times each, is that people are always susceptible to, emotional about being judged. So this is why we call them assessments and not tests, because we all still have a negative association, probably from school, about a test. If someone's going to test you, it's either I pass or I fail. So language like this assessment is a really good thing to do. And the language that Stefan used, as he said, he's been doing this a very long time, that's exactly a language that we want, which is that uplifting language. So I'm just trying to think about the term in the exam. I think it's like positive language and positive reinforcement, because we are listening to that the whole time, all the way through your exam. So you start practicing setting people up for success really, really early. And as he pointed out, always relating it back to their goals.
Yeah.
All right.
If you think of everything as just gathering information, if you think about it from that perspective, then you will speak much more positively about it. Because every test that you see someone do, and I'll say the word test, but every test or assessment that you do, you have to think of it as getting information that has told you more about that individual so that you can help them. If you think about it from that perspective, then your language is going to come off like really, really well.
Yeah, I listened to something this week and I loved it because it was talking about discovery. Come from a place of discovery, and we talk about curiosity. So when you're coaching, that's exactly what you're doing. You're information gathering, discovery, all that sort of thing. Okay, so role play on video and self-evaluate, because the other thing, I said language is a huge part of this. So how are you communicating? It's very easy, especially in your first, when we ask you to do the first resistance training exercise, which will be a squat of various forms. It's very easy for us as pro trainers to stand there for 5 minutes while you tell the client everything that they need to do, all the things that they shouldn't be doing. And that's too much communication. Yeah, we're looking for a snapshot of a personal training session. So 3 key points. 3 key points. We're going to do a squat, feet hip distance apart, brace your abs, sit your butt back and down, and maybe push through the heels as you come up. So you're going to demonstrate it. You're going to tell them what they're doing, you demonstrate it, and then you ask them to perform it. Your client performs it once or twice, and you're either going to say 1 or 2 things. That is fantastic. You're doing such an amazing job. You know, all of those motivational things, or you're going to say, okay, hold it there. What I noticed was that your chest was dropping forward. So may I suggest that this time we're going to squeeze the shoulder blades and try and just open that chest just a little bit more as you go down. So what we do is we're looking for those communication skills, which is you're going to connect with the client. You're going to recommend what you want them to do. You're going to demonstrate it, and then the follow-up is the coaching. So we're not expecting you to get that perfect all the way through, but just be aware of how much talking you are doing. So also on your demo, your form needs to be good. It needs to be perfect. Actually, I'm not even going to say good. Stefan was rolling his eyes there. It needs to be perfect. So, okay, you cannot do give me an example of what we see people not being able to do.
A squat. Deadlift.
I was going to say deadlift. Okay, so if you're coming to your exam and you can't deadlift, then it's not time for you to be doing your exam, okay? Because you need to be able to do 1 perfectly. Okay, you can't do 2, 3, 4, and 5 because maybe you've got a back injury or something like that. But in which case, you need to figure out how you're going to demonstrate that form, because people are visual learners. So we highly recommend that you go away and you practice your form for the basics, which is your squat, your lunge, your push, which will be probably something like a push-up, a pull, that hip hinge, which is a deadlift, and then a plank. So even if the hip hinge, you can't do a deadlift, you could do glute bridges. Yeah, you could demonstrate glute bridges. So find something that you can do perfectly within that evaluation form. Steph, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, so for communicating, again, like your demo is also communicating. You don't have to talk, right? So my introduction always, and again, coming from a real world setting, it's the only thing you're communicating is why you're doing a squat or why you're doing a deadlift. As adults find excuses for everything. And I find that kids just do whatever you say. Kids are the best people to train. They just do whatever you say. Adults need reason, right? So above all else, if you're doing a squat, make sure the first thing you want to say is, okay, we're squatting today because a squat is going to be the best way for us to gain that 10 pounds of muscle. You need to relate it to the goal, okay? If you say that, if I said to anybody, if you do squats, you're going to be ripped in 10 days, every single person would do squats, right? So it's make sure that you relate it to the goal. That's all you really need to communicate. And then the only time you should ever be talking would be if you're cueing during their exercise. So cue would be those 1 to 2 word responses to make a correction. So if you see that someone's doing a squat and their knees are caving in, don't stop them. You want to just say knees out, convey something to the point for them to actually make the correction. Now, if they make the correction, great. Just keep going. You have nothing else to say. But if there's an issue, like if you're cueing and then it's not happening, in between sets, that's when you would do your coaching or your correcting. In between sets is when you would explain to them, hey, your knees are caving in. I'm asking you to push them out. then during that time is where you would actually start to communicate, is during their rest periods. And that's kind of it. So if you're cueing and they're doing everything you're saying, there's no need for you to say anything else. Just say, great job, good job, progressions, regressions. What else? Oh yeah, and then from a demoing perspective, if you're injured, we understand, like coaches, we get injured all the time. Another thing that you can do is that you can provide a video demoing what you want to do. So if you know you're going into your exam and let's say, for some reason you can't shoulder press or you can't do a push-up today because you hurt your shoulder, if you can provide a video showing exactly what you want to do, then that would also be acceptable because you're still providing some kind of visual aid and showing them exactly what you want. So I have to do that sometimes too. If I'm having a really terrible day and I can't snatch, then I'll show someone a video of what needs to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points. Great points. Then we're going to talk a little bit about shared video and practice with family, friends, and mentors. So yes, video yourself doing these things and then watch them back. Everybody doesn't like doing that, but it's a really good way to do it. A technique that we practice during the course, which is really good, is practicing your different coaching. So your visual, your auditory, and your kinesthetic. So visually, when you're going to demonstrate a squat, where do you need to stand in relation to your client? Do you stand to the side of them? Do you stand in front of them? Do you stand side on? So we're looking for how you position yourself to demo a particular exercise. And that's because people are visual learners. And in a gym setting, if you take your exam in a gym and then moving on when you're training in a gym, there's an awful lot of distractions. There's an awful lot of hot people walking around in very skimpy outfits, for one. There's also TVs on, there's music, there's people walking by. So unless you are really engaging, your client is going to be looking at everything else. So you've got to make it, like Steph and I were saying, really concise and to the point. When you're demonstrating something, it needs to be where your client can see you and is looking at you. So that's the visual. The auditory is, what are you going to say? So we've talked about that communication, being very, very specific about what it is you're expecting your client to do. And then the kinesthetic part of cueing is, what will it feel like? So how do I know if I'm doing this right? Well, you will feel on the squat, as you push up through the heels, you're going to feel your glutes engage when you get to the top. Oh, right. Yeah, now I get it. And as you sit your butt back, imagine you're going to sit in a chair. Those are all what we call kinesthetic cues. So using those three elements will really help you in your coaching skills. And that's something you can practice with family, friends, etc. Optional resources. So you do have access via your CanFitPro member portal to the Trainer Plus, where you can create all sorts of programs. And as we talked about the other day when we were talking about the theory exam, is that everybody is going to want you to do them a program. So you're going to have ultimate, access to family and friends and people that want to have a program designed. So you can use this amazing tool, and then you can share that program to get everybody going. And then what you could do is you could ask them to then video themselves and send it back to you. So when it comes to the exam itself, we will take you from the assessments onto a piece of equipment. We didn't really talk about cardio there. So we usually would like to see you on a piece of equipment, because when we release you into the fitness industry, it's always a good idea that you know how to do everything. Well, not everything, but a little bit of everything safely. So something like a treadmill, an elliptical, or a bike would be good. If you wanted to demonstrate it using some sort of HIIT, some sort of boot camp, you could do that, but it's not going to be as easy as for us to market, because we're going to have to ask you lots of questions. So up to you. We can make it fit both ways. So on the cardio, the warm-up and cardio, it's one section. We will expect you to be coaching your client using rate of perceived exertion. So you're not just going to put them on a piece of equipment or get them started doing something and then say, okay, I'm just going to time you for 15 minutes now. There's got to be all the setup. So the setup is like Stefan's talked about, the reason we're doing this. Yeah. So why, oh, I hate doing cardio. Why am I going to do cardio? Well, it's exciting because cardio is going to help you with your fat burning. Steady state is where we're going to get in and we're going to start really attacking that stubborn fat, all those sort of things. So all of that coaching and motivation, you're going to be giving information about why is a warm-up important. And then brought into that coaching is on a scale of 1 to 10, if 1 or 0 is nothing at all and 10 is as fast as you can, where do you feel you are now? So using that coaching and communication, we're going to expect to see that in the warm-up. And then when your pro trainer has heard everything that you're going to say and maybe has said, that's interesting, how else might you want to find out where your client is? So we might ask you a couple of questions just to see if you're nervous and you've forgotten to put something in there. But if nothing comes or you've answered everything, we'll say, okay, now we want to see you coach your client into cardio. So let me see how you're going to increase the intensity and how you're going to coach your client through this cardio portion. So then you will then start the cardio. You're talking to your client about why cardio is important to them. And then your pro trainer will stand back and we're watching to see how you're going to increase the intensity, how you're going to check your client's rate of perceived exertion. And then also we're looking for how you're monitoring their heart rate. So it could be various different forms. And we're expecting on your program card already, you would have written down for the 2-week segment that you've written out for us, you've written down, or you should have written down, the target heart rates. So we've already seen that you can calculate it, but now what we're looking for is, okay, how are you going to be monitoring your client's heart rate during this cardio on warm-up time? So that's the warm-up and cardio portion. From there, we take it into those 6 blocks. Each block is the same. So it's the squat and it's the lunge. As I've said already, we will determine on the day what equipment is available. We will determine which type of squat we want you to do based on what you've covered in the course. We're not going to ask you to do anything you haven't covered in the course, but the exercises are laid out in the exam, in the evaluation that you've been sent. So you're going to be asked to do a squat, a lunge, a hip hinge, a push, a pull, and a plank. Yeah. So you need to have those prepared. You need to have your coaching prepared. And just look at it like this. Once we sign that piece of paper at the end of your exam, you are now a personal trainer, which means you could get a job in a gym and you are expected to be able to coach and teach all sorts of squats. So of course, we're going to ask you to demonstrate certain exercises. And we're not going to tell you what they are because we don't want you walking into the industry with 6 exercises that you can teach. You've got to be able to do a little bit more than that. And then with each one of those 6 sections, we are listening to see if you're talking about muscle groups that are worked. And you can do it in a really natural conversation. As Stefan said, the reason that we're going to do a squat is, you want to build that strength, and the biggest muscles are your quads, hamstrings, and glutes. So this is really going to fire those up. So just if you can put it in a conversation, that's brilliant, because that's the whole building rapport, tying it all back to goals. So you're going to be asked to do that. We're going to ask you, and once we've seen you coach and we've seen that, you might do 1 set, or your pro trainer might say, okay, let's think about how you could, change, add a little bit more information, or where do you think you should stand? So in which case we might ask to see another set, because we just think that nerves have got the better of you, and maybe with a little bit of coaching, we can get out of you what we need. Because, if you know it, you know it. If you don't, it's very obvious to us that you don't know it. So we will give you an opportunity to see if we can just draw a little bit more out of you. So your client, your mock client, won't be doing a full workout. Okay, if we see after 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 reps, you've said everything you need to, bam, we're moving on. So your pro trainer will say, okay, just stand here, let me know on the spot with what we've got around us, how are you going to regress that move for a client who's struggling with this? And you don't have to demo it. We're just expecting you to do this and say, okay, I'd get them to do a wall squat. Perfect. Okay. And if they were doing really well, how would you progress it? And it's a bit like that agonist-antagonist chart that you filled out in your theory exam. You cannot say add weight all the way through. Okay, we're expecting to test your knowledge. So your pro trainer will say, all right, give me a little bit more. How could we regress and progress that? So that will be, and then you'll be asked to do a stretch after each component. So it will be the squat. Once we've seen you demo it, we've seen the create rapport. You've given all the information, you can progress it, you can regress it. We'll say, all right, now I'd like you to coach your client with a stretch that you could use after you've been squatting. And again, we're looking for you to demonstrate it. We're then looking for you to not just say, oh, to your client, okay, you do it. There's got to be follow-up. So the follow-up is, this is why we're doing it. You demonstrate it and you say, okay, so where are you feeling that? Oh, interesting, you're feeling it there. What happens if we do this? Because, you know, we need to know that you can coach your client and that you know which muscle you're stretching. So I know Stefan's going to have something to add to that.
No.
No, okay. I thought you would.
I think it's just, I think when the biggest thing here, and if I'm just looking at the slide in front of me, is just, you have to be confident, you have to look confident, you have to sound confident. And that's not just because of the person you're with. You know, yes, you should be very confident, you know, and that will help your client be confident. If you're kind of on edge or kind of nervous, your client is also going to be nervous. So you definitely have to be the stronger one, you know, within the relationship. And most importantly, and most people don't think about it, is that you're kind of a walking billboard. So how you look when you're training someone, every single person around you is going to see that. So you are constantly being interviewed every single time you're on a gym floor or you're around people. How you carry yourself, how you act, how you talk, that is where all of referral work is going to come from, or that is going to be the reason why someone walks up to you. It's what they see you doing with how you're talking, your body language, so on and so forth. So, you know, when you are with someone and they're doing exercise, you should be working equally as hard. You know, you should be walking around, you should be dynamic. You know, you shouldn't be sitting there watching them counting reps. You know, in front of your client, sure won't matter. But for everybody else who's watching you, you know, I'll be honest, 9 out of 10 times, that person's not going to approach you and ask you for some guidance. They're going to approach the person who's dynamic, who's engaged, who's moving around, because that's going to be just instinctually who they would ask for help and who they would want to work with. So how you act, how you move, you know, and we mark you on that. It's kind of in the intangible part of your exam. It's like there are marks given for that. So be mindful of that. You know, when you're doing your exercises or doing your stretches, you know, try to move around, be dynamic with it.
Yeah, that's great information. And I agree, because there's a section that we have, which is session management. So it's all those little things, and it's the stuff that we cover in your live course when you're out on the gym floor. So the way that I would recommend, and we say it over and over again, is if you haven't had a personal trainer and you come to the practical exam, how on earth do you know what a personal trainer is meant to do? So if you haven't had a personal trainer and you're looking at booking your practical exam, you need to go and observe personal trainers, because you're knowledge smart, but you're not smart within those little intangible things like Stefan was saying. So you need to be observing personal trainers, exactly like you said then about, well, where do they stand? What do they do? Do they just count numbers? Is that all you do? It's so much more than that. And this is what the practical exam will be testing you on. So that what I think would be one of my biggest takeaways is to go and study personal trainers, not in a creepy way. If you can find somebody to mentor you, that would be absolutely perfect. And a lot of the time, if you're coming into the industry, maybe you know other personal trainers, you could ask them, would it be okay if I could just stand back? And I've done it with Stefan a couple of times, and he says, I just need to check with my clients, make sure my clients are all right with that. And then they say, fine. And then you can go and literally observe a personal trainer teaching a session. So that's maybe something, if you haven't had a personal trainer, that is something I can highly recommend that you do before you come for your practical exam. And exactly like the slide says there, you need to bring that attitude with you, because this is an extension of healthcare. And we talked about it on Wednesday, and we will be at some point, hopefully in the not too distant future, we will be classed as healthcare, because that's what we are. So as such, it's a caring profession. It's not a profession driven by ego. This is a profession driven by care of helping people reach their goals, as Stefan said, or just live healthier for longer. So I think coming with that attitude and coming with that openness, as we've talked about, and making it all about the client. And there's an acronym that I know we use over and over again in our course, which is the what's in it for me, which is you will get buy-in from your client, you will get repeat business from your client, you will get recommendations from or referrals from people to you, because you've focused your business on what's in it for me when you talk to your client. Because clients want to know, I'll do whatever you tell me because I trust you, if you tell me why I'm doing it and what the benefit to me is all about. So I think those are some really good top tips there. Anything else you can think to add to that, Stefan?
No.
No? No. All right. So we are just going to have a quick look at the chat to see if there's any questions there.
I guess also, I don't know if we touched on this, but make sure all your templates are filled out. You know, sometimes I've had exams and some of the templates are not filled out at all. So please make sure you do that. And please don't be late to your exam. You will lose marks. Please don't be late to your exam. You will lose marks for that. Okay, right away. Being punctual is very important.
Okay, so I'm just going to clarify. So Ron's asked, so if I can't do an overhead squat, and this is as a personal trainer. So because you've got an injury, if you can't do an exam or you can't do a certain move, then on an exception, yes, you can show a video of it. But remember, this is an exam. So if you turn up at the exam, you say, well, I can't do anything, but I've got it all on video, that will be a fail. All right. But as an exception, if you say, I have damaged my shoulder, I've damaged my knee, is it okay if I show a video? That is the visual part of a demonstration. We will expect you to be able to give the correct audible cues. So you should be able to cue it with all the right terminology, and then using kinesthetic. So, and of course you can always modify. So I'm just trying to think of something. So, okay, you can't do a walking lunge, but demonstrate to me a static lunge and then coach your client in a walking lunge. So it would be a very exception to the rule to do that. It's not going to be the norm, is what I would say to that. Let me see what else.
Also, please spend time to fix your shoulder. Okay.
Me? Are you?
No, the question, if you can't do an overhead squat because you are injured, you know, please take time to hire someone to fix your shoulder. That I feel, I get that a lot with personal trainers as well. They kind of walk around with injuries and they don't do anything about it. And that kind of blows my mind, because you're helping people, yet you're not seeking help. So make sure your shoulder is going to get fixed, because, you know, it doesn't matter how old you are. Again, I don't know, you know, if you're 70, 80 years old and you're still a personal trainer, you should be able to squat, you should be able to deadlift. You know, you're the expert, so you should be able to still do these things. And
figure out how to fix it. But I didn't think you were talking about me. So for those who don't know, Steph's been my trainer before, and I did have a bad shoulder, so I thought he was having to go at me on camera.
No, not at all. Pertaining to the question.
All right, Leanne, we've got a question from Ron about, will the pro trainer choose the exercise? Absolutely, we will, but within the bounds of the 6 primal movements that we're looking for. Yes. Thank you, Louise. Should our PTS show? Oh, that's a canfitpro question. That's not us. All right. I think that's all the questions that have been asked. I'm just checking. Yes, it is. All right. So yes, we think you've got this. You've got lots of opportunity to stay home and practice, and the internet is your friend, because you can find lots of. I know what Stefan's going to say. You can find lots of good things, but you can also find lots of bad things on there. So check your
questionable things.
Questionable things. So use the resources that we've talked about. You've got the canfitpro access to that amazing online platform that you can use. You're going to video your family and friends, and then just work on your language. Lots of time to work on that periodization program as well. So what we would say, as we've been saying all week, is on behalf of canfitpro, we want everybody to stay nice and safe. Stay home. We've got lots to practice. We've got lots to build on. It's a great time for internalizing things. So if you are in the middle of your certification, it's an opportunity for you to dig a little bit deeper into all of the materials that you've had access to, and really get a thorough understanding using things like Zoom and Blue Jeans and all the other technologies that's out there. You can, still be coaching some family members and people using social media and using these different platforms. So we'd highly recommend that you do that. And yeah, we just want everybody to stay safe. And once we know that we can safely bring everything back live between canfitpro and your pro trainers, we will be in contact to pick up wherever you were and help you get to the finish line and set you up for success. So on behalf of myself and Stefan and the canfitpro team, thank you so much for joining us, and have a fantastic weekend.
Thanks, bro.
Thank you.